Hey fam, welcome or welcome back. Tisha here, back for another chapter reading of The Witness Wore Red. Go ahead and do me a favor and hit the like button as we jump into this next chapter. We are in chapter 17, Emerging Wings. I had left the FLDS to gain freedom, and yet I felt powerless in so many ways. Anguish over the fight with Cole and the way my brothers treated Ben was like a raw wound. Right next to it was all the guilt and shame for those I had left behind. I wept over my sister Elisa, stuck in a violent and loveless marriage. Amelia, who had been in touch, had told me that Elisa suffered a miscarriage from being raped by her husband. Can you imagine how violent he had to have been for this young lady to have been pregnant and have lost the baby as a result of how aggressive he was with her? And correct me if I'm wrong, but in their faith, once they're pregnant, aren't they supposed to stop having relations? So why was he even continuing to have relations with her? Yet this young lady kept going to Warren and kept getting told to go right back to be violated some more. I'm annoyed already. I wept for my brothers, scraping to survive like me in a foreign world. I wept for my mom and for Allie and Sherry, and the knowledge that my littlest sisters were in danger of becoming child brides like Elisa. I wept over feeling like I could do nothing to stop it. It was the deepest despair I had experienced since leaving. At one point, my tears of frustration turned into a plea. God, please, just show me a different way to live. Something, anything has to be better than this. Finally, I got up and I sat down at my harp. My tears subsided as I became caught up in the music. I played and played, pouring my emotions out to God, and it was like a slave to my soul. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Sheepishly, I made my way to the entrance, realizing that I'd been playing for hours and had probably annoyed neighbors I hadn't even met. In my head, I could hear Irene screaming, "Can you please tell Becky to stop?" I opened the door and, to my surprise, found two very lovely smiling ladies I guessed to be in their late 20s. "Hello there," they cried, almost simultaneously. "We're your neighbors." One held out a plate of cookies, and they introduced themselves with a great deal of laughter. "We're Mary and Leah. Is it Houghton? Alexa, how do you pronounce Houghton? There she goes, not working again, y'all. Hold on. Okay, according to Alexa, it's Houghton. So we're Mary and Leah Houghton. We heard you playing and thought we'd stop by. Horrified, I started to apologize. "Oh, no, no," they both said. Leah placed her hand kindly on my arm. "We were excited to hear you play. We're both musicians." Their enthusiasm was contagious, and they didn't seem to notice or care that our living room had only a harp and some boxes in it. "Rumor has it you might play the fiddle as well," asked Mary, the taller of the two. I nodded, curiously. The ladies went on to explain that they were part of a little old Opry on the Bay, a musical group that put on two big performances a year at Christmas and in the summer. I don't think I said that right. Alexa, how do you pronounce Opry? Alexa, how do you pronounce Opry?
Okay, here's pronunciations. I would pronounce it as Opry.
Okay, Alexa, stop. Opry on the Bay, a musical group that put on two big performances a year at Christmas and in the summer. They were already prepping for the summer concert series and desperately needed a fiddle player. I was dumbfounded, but quickly grew excited. I sent a silent prayer of thanks to God. He had sent me a lifeline of something familiar in a foreign world. Along with the baby growing inside of me, I felt I had somewhere to serve and something to bring me joy. She is in this world at this point and she just has herself and Ben and maybe some coworkers. Her brothers are being mean, so she's probably not interacting with them the same way she was at first. So I can understand how for her, this brought her some peace and relief because here it is, she's back in something that she loves, and it's also an opportunity for her to meet people. Ben and I were anxiously awaiting the time when the nausea from my pregnancy would when the nausea from my pregnancy was supposed to subside, but it never seemed to go away. Because what they don't tell you is morning sickness is not just morning sickness. It's all day sickness. For me, I didn't have morning sickness. I had afternoon sickness. And my afternoon sickness always kicked in right around the time it was for me to come home from school, change my clothes and go to work. I'm in my senior year of my last year of college, and I am working full time and having to battle the nausea from a baby. So I understand what she's talking about when she's talking about that sickness. Ben worked later shifts generally, and he usually wanted to sleep at the time I would need a ride to work. So I walked several miles there and back each day. Oh, wow. My coworkers were so appalled that he'd take the car, especially given my condition. But I was used to this treatment from a man. I'm trying to figure out why she would do that either. Like, girl, did she not know how to? No, she knew how to drive because she used to take the van and stuff. He should have given her the car, especially if he was going to be at home all day sleep. I don't like that either. I'm with your coworkers, girl. His needs naturally came before mine because that's what they're taught. It was how we had both been raised. At work, Ben finally confided in his boss, Michelle, about my condition. Congratulations, she cried, genuinely delighted. I'm sure the grandmothers are very excited. When Ben hesitated, she looked at him quizzically. Haven't you told them? Uh, no, he proceeded to share our story. Michelle was very understanding, but adamant we see a doctor immediately. And within a couple of days, she sent him home with a whole bag of maternity clothes. See, they've been taught all this time that people of the world are these horrible people. And here they are, where they keep on meeting these people who really are good people, who are supporting them and having their backs more than the supposed good people. The irony in that, right? The next time I came into the restaurant to visit Ben, she greeted me warmly. I beamed back at her. Happily, I reported that I had seen a doctor, a female OBGYN. Michelle shared with me some of her own stories of pregnancy that helped me to realize that there were a lot of hominas that take place during pregnancy and delivery. It felt so good not to feel dirty about the process because she's never been properly educated about this stuff. My goodness. Her maternal warmth made me realize how much I longed for nurturing and to talk with my own mother. I worried about the kind of parent I would be. I still seemed to make so many mistakes. One night, I awoke to such intense nausea, I barely made it to the bathroom. In tears again, I glanced into the mirror and pulled my stringy hair back from my face. Abruptly, I was overcome with something else, the most incredible sense of déjà vu. It was the same vision I had experienced in my final few days at Ruland's home, and what I had dreamed several times in the night at least 6 months before I left. Each time it had seemed eerie, and yet here it was, the same lights and colors I had experienced, the yellow tiles of linoleum and the unmistakable Lake Louise turquoise blue sink. I had never seen these rooms before Ben and I had fled to Coos Bay and then rented that duplex. I thought back to the night, trapped in Ruland's home, feeling like there was no way out. until the moment I had that vision. Something very deep and meaningful permeated my soul. The knowledge that I was not alone. Had that been my baby? That was impossible, and yet somehow it seemed very real. I placed my hands upon my belly, which was still quite small. I felt a surge of connection, and my heart soared within my chest. Somehow, it seemed, my baby, or the universe, had sent messages of love and support to me long before Rulin had passed, long before I knew I'd be a mother. I felt connected again to the larger world, and from that point on, despite the ongoing nausea, I was able to let go of the fear and get excited. To hell with what anyone else thought of my situation. I would be the mother my baby deserved. Good for you, girl. That summer, as my tummy expanded during the last few months of pregnancy, we kicked off the Little Old Opry on the Bay. There I met the most incredible people, like the Houghton. I forgot how. I can't remember how to pronounce their name, y'all. Alexa, how do you pronounce Houghton?
I pronounced that Houghton. But
Alexa, stop. Like the Houghton girl's mother, Martha, who sort of adopted me too. She was the first person to whom I divulged my background and history. Oh, wow. I was also privileged to practice and play with local favorites like Dr. Bob, a chiropractor and passionate drummer, and a lead guitar player named Vinny, who rocked the house. After leaving the FLDS feeling like I would never have close relationships again, I discovered a whole new kind of community. But that at the end of each event, I stood on the stage with roses in my arms to major applause, realizing that it felt empty without Ben in the audience. So she's doing all these things and he's not there. My guess is because he's working, or was it because he's sleeping? Because if it was something where he could disturb his sleep for a little bit to at least go watch a performance or two, that would have been nice, but we'll see why. When I was making new connections, Ben and I were facing some rocky times, in our relationship. In our efforts to save money for our child, we spent a great deal of time apart at our respective jobs, and the differences in our ages and temperaments began to emerge. He had gained a crowd of friends at the Cedar Grill that he partied with, after hours, and he began drinking regularly. This is one of the things that we've heard is often a problem, especially with the males in their community, is that a lot of them do become addicted to substances. And given the fact that she's seen certain things happen with her brother, I'm sure that this is something that bothered her even more. But Ben, even though you're a couple years, I think, was it like 7 years younger than her, or however many years it is, you've got a baby on the way. So you gotta like tighten up and do what you're supposed to do, because that money or time you could be spending doing that, you could be getting prepared for this baby. That's my thoughts. Y'all tell me yours. At first I was invited along, but not only was I pregnant, I also worked early and long shifts nearly every day. Shortly after the season ended, we received the news from Ben's siblings in Short Creek that during Sunday service on August 10th, 2003, Warren declared that the people were so immoral that the blessings of the priesthood had been removed from them all. What kind of crap is that? The main one himself, that's the most immoral of immoral, that married like what, 40 something underage girls. I can't remember what the number is, y'all, but it's a big number of underage girls. The man that was touching little girls and touching little boys and doing disgusting things and harassing his wives. That man has the nerve to call somebody immoral. The man that is robbing people, the man that is taking all types of money, the man that is taking deeds, the man that has millions of dollars, the man that is disrupting homes and kicking out fathers and their sons and redistributing wives and their kids like he has that authority. That man is calling somebody immoral. Oh, he has a nerve. With that, he suspended all further religious meetings. though, of course, his most righteous followers were allowed to continue to show their loyalty by paying extra tithes and offering. So y'all are immoral, but give me your money and give me more of it, because money may buy you your salvation. This is ridiculous. He even planted huge wheelbarrows at the entrances and exits for the faithful to dump their offerings to him, and shockingly enough, they did. After being on the outside long enough to see his manipulations for what they were, I was incredulous that the people would put up with this. We all speculated on where these wheelbarrows of cash would be spent, especially since rumors abounded that Zion was being created in Colorado or Texas. I think it was Texas is where it was created, but y'all correct me down below if I'm wrong. Colorado or Texas. A few of Ben's friends and family had stayed in touch, and in May, his brother Scott came to Coos Bay with two Short Creek friends to see him. Scott was on his way out of the FLDS, but his friends still had strong ties. In late summer, my youngest brother Levi had come to live with Cole and shared more about what was happening in Short Creek. I became worried about the fate of my family under such a dictator, and I continued to be plagued by the nightmares about young Allie and Sherry. August 31st, 2003 was my 27th birthday, and although I desperately wanted my child to have his own special day, he had a different idea. Oh, okay. I went into an intense and difficult labor, and I was frightened to be surrounded by strange doctors and nurses. I hadn't realized how much my FLDS beliefs about medical care added to my fear. Due to Warren's influence and my natural discomfort around even partial nudity, I had only attended 2 births. One had been highly traumatic, and we had almost lost my mother to excessive bleeding. Ben was just as scared. I had also wanted to have a natural birth without the use of drugs. Several hours into labor, my mother called to wish me a happy birthday. How I longed to tell her what was happening and to have her comfort and advice. Yet I had never had the courage to tell her I was pregnant. So that whole entire time, her mom didn't know. And that was because they were already giving her all types of judgment for leaving. She didn't want to hear it. And I don't blame her, given the circumstances. Every time I had tried to broach the subject, she had cried and begged me to come back to Short Creek. I would not have my baby's first days tainted by rumor and innuendo, so Ben simply told her I would call her later. In the middle of labor, Ben asked if he could leave out and went with a friend to have lunch while I strained through hours of labor alone. Ben, I'm not liking this. Ben, I'm not liking this. I'm trying to think of the times though. Maybe men weren't normally in there with their community. I don't know, especially because of all the different things that they were expected to wear. So to him, it wasn't that big of a deal, but that's a big deal for you to not support her. We'll see what she says about it. I recall that my sister Savannah had gone into labor in her garden while her husband was off gallivanting, and realized Ben was doing exactly what he had seen men do all his life. But at some point, you got to change it. I just think it's really messed up to have left her, especially considering the fact that it's not like she has family and people that she knows nearby. She's literally in a room with a bunch of strangers, and you aren't helping her. This isn't the ancient of days. This is 2003, and whether that's how it was done in your community or not, the least you could have done was stayed at the hospital outside the room or something to make sure she was okay. That's my opinion. You guys tell me yours. Finally, our baby decided it was time to come out into the world. And at the moment of his birth, I felt my whole universe shift. Kyle was the most beautiful baby I had ever seen. He had startling big blue eyes and his father's red hair. As I looked at him, all the terror slipped away. Tearfully, I felt blessed to wrap our fragile newborn in the beautiful new clothes and blankets I'd been given by my Ramada Inn co-workers at a surprise shower they had thrown me. I didn't realize that after such a strenuous labor and delivery, I should rest. Upon Ben's urgent prodding, we went home as quickly as the doctor let us. At home, Ben expected me to cook and clean along with caring for the baby. Nah, Ben, come, like, I get that that's the way that y'all were raised, but y'all both felt like a lot of what you were taught was wrong. So I would hope that you would undo some of this thinking and chip in. Ben, you become a little problematic for me, sir, but let's keep reading. Amelia visited from Canada to help me out and make sure I got some rest, and I will never forget her great kindness and the risk she took in coming. Shortly after she left, Ben's cousin John came to live with us, and he and Ben expected me to wait on them while they caught up on old times. Oh no. Ain't no way. While in Coos Bay, I had been exposed to families in which husbands shared in the domestic duties and child rearing, but I didn't know how to broach the subject with men. I think about my parents, right? And in the beginning of their relationship, my mother was a stay-at-home mom. My father was in the military. He could afford for her to be a stay-at-home mom. But there are very much so periods while she was staying at home where various family members came and stayed with her to help assist. I don't understand. And when he did come, my father didn't have a problem chipping in, cleaning up, making dinner sometimes, and things of that nature. And I'm listening to this and I just I can't fathom it, but I got to remind myself that about the community that they're raising, I guess. Anyways, so he continued partying, often several nights in a row, and never rose to feed Kyle in the night, even when we moved to formula. During the day, he helped out here or there, but only if Kyle wasn't crying. Still, for what I knew, it was a joyful experience. Being a new mother and my involvement in Christmas Opry I keep saying that word wrong, Opry, Opry, were great miracles. The music helped me to feel the spirit of the season more than ever before. Any acknowledgement of December 25th had been considered devil worship in the FLDS. Therefore, it felt deliciously scandalous to bring our first Christmas tree home to our sparse apartment and put a few meaningful gifts under it. Fun fact, I think I've spoken about this before. My mom, at her home, we did not have up a tree. It was a no-no, pagan this and pagan that. I often experienced Christmas when I went to my grandma's. That December, more shocking news reached us from Short Creek. My mother's husband, Uncle Fred, had disappeared in the middle of the night, taken on a stretcher by an ambulance and surrounded by men who were not in medical garb. Some said he had been called to great work, but no one really knew if that was the case. Warren apparently reported to the congregation a few weeks later that Fred had been released as bishop, saying that Fred was in an agreement to his release. Yet I wonder about all the others who had begun proofing or disappearing. Were they all in agreement? The answer is no. I don't think a lot of them were. I think that he was forcing people out left and right. Let me continue. I wanted to know what this meant for Mom and the girls. All we knew was that William Timpson Jessup, then in his mid-40s, had been named as new caretaker for all of Uncle Fred's wives and children, perhaps because he was a younger, easier candidate for manipulation than Fred had been. That January, Ben and I decided to visit family members in Short Creek, entering Utah for the first time since we had returned his brother's truck 14 months earlier. It was a risk, and we didn't know the reception we'd receive. But because of our son, I felt safe knowing that Warren wouldn't want me now. Most of all, we desired to introduce our beautiful baby boy to our families, who remained precious in our hearts. Ben and I planned to stay in St. George with Ben's brother Scott and his wife Holly, who had just left the FLDS. But first, we'd been invited to Jeffrey Barlow and his wife Roxy to stay with them in Salt Lake City on our way down. After Jeffy, oh, I said Jeffrey, it says Jeffy. After Jeffy had left the FLDS, he met and married Roxy, who was a Mormon with a contagious enthusiasm for life. What amazed me was how gracefully she wore makeup and that she had pierced ears, and yet she didn't look like a harlot. It gave me a lot of courage to lay aside guilt for taking on some of the ways of the world. She was surprisingly easy for me to relate to as well. It was nice to feel connected to a young person outside the FLDS. That Sunday afternoon, as we hung out with Jeffy and Roxy, enjoying pizza and discussing old times and new lives, we were suddenly inundated with cell calls. Warren had apparently called a special Sunday service in which he'd excommunicated approximately 20 of the most prominent and influential FLDS brethren, meaning he got rid of a bunch of men. Why? Because maybe those men might have called him out. Maybe those men are his competition. With him, you never know. But brethren, that's brothers, that's men. Let's see. Many of the men excommunicated were Jeffy's blood uncles, the family that had enjoyed special privilege and status since the time of the prophet John Barlow had lost all of its power. Warren had told their wives they were released from these men, and Jeffy's aunts and cousins had been instructed to pack up all of their belongings and leave immediately. Not just the church, but their homes owned by the church, because these men sign over their stuff to the church and he can kick them out and there's nothing they can do about it because they signed it over. It's just, it's sick. Other men were sent to repent from afar. I shuddered. More displaced women and children who would be given to other, more faithful men. Another shocker was that Warren had ousted 4 of his own brothers, declaring them deceivers and hypocrites. He said that anyone darkened by them would be cast out. Another clear message to every member of the FLDS that if you're against him, you're gonna get kicked out. You can't even speak up at this point then. Warren's was the only claim on the congregation's eternal salvation, and every individual was nothing without him. When he called for a vote against the ousting, everyone looked around, but not one soul dared to raise a voice in opposition, because if they did, they would be kicked out too. It's just a trap. The next day, as we approached Short Creek, I nearly hyperventilated as I remembered what it was like to have every action driven by fear. Ben was experiencing many of the same feelings. It was strange driving through the town, so familiar and yet so foreign to us now. We visited with Mom, Sherry, and Allie briefly, and it was a balm to my heart to see my mother hold little Kyle. I was grateful that the loving smiles on the girls' faces replaced some of the anger I had seen when we had left. We were able to stop by to see Elisa next, and my heart sank at the sight of her. It was clear that Alan was still not treating her well. I hoped my presence would show that she could have a beautiful life outside the FLDS, but I couldn't force my thoughts or beliefs on her. Even though my hair was shorter, I did wear a long skirt out of respect for the people. As we stepped into the grocery store, though, the aisles cleared as if we had leprosy. I was hoping to bridge the gap, especially with Ben's younger sisters working at the store. When they saw us, however, they turned around and went into the back. Because if you have certain conversations with them, they're probably going to snitch on you too. Not only that, they think that they're probably going to hell because of, living in eternal darkness because of their choices. We don't serve adulterous people in our store. Isn't that funny that they're adulterous, but technically, by the law, they won't. She wasn't really married to anybody. I'm just saying. One man said, "Oh, we don't serve adulterous people in our store," said one man who had been friends of my mother's family for years. I blinked back tears. The younger cashier was very quiet and uncomfortable, but she did allow us to purchase food and we left quickly. Ben's dad worked in the hardware store behind the grocery on the same block. As we headed back there to see if we could catch him, several local police showed up and followed us around because the Doomsday Squad is all throughout. Their police are all people who are a part of the cult. So, of course, now you're going to intimidate them by following them around. "David is not here," said one of the officers. "Your kind is not welcomed here. Leave." Everywhere we went, people pointed at us, took pictures, or followed us in menacing looking vehicles. The God Squad had expanded its fleet since we'd been here last. Finally, we made it to Ben's house, where we greeted his parents and many of his younger siblings. We noticed the God Squad stayed nearby. At 4 months, Kyle's eyes remained a startling big and blue as they had at birth. As startlingly big and blue as they had at birth. As Ben's parents held him and played with him, they were entranced. "I can't believe how absolutely perfect he is," exclaimed Ben's mother. His father nodded and stared at our son with fascination and curiosity. Later, Ben's brother Wendell informed us that as soon as we left, the family had a discussion about us and Kyle. "That child is so perfect and so beautiful," Ben's father had remarked. "The only thing I can think is that that baby must be Rulon's boy. There's no other way." What? My eye even ran. Okay, this is what we're going with. Got it. Like, what in the, like, come on, people. Ben's mother had nodded in agreement. I was furious when Wendell told me. I would have expected Warren to think that, but not to hear it from Ben's family. But to hear it, excuse me, from Ben's family was, Lord, get it together. Let me start over. I would have expected Warren to think that. But to hear that Ben's family was saying this about their very own flesh and blood astounded me. And even had Rulon been able, and even, yeah, it says, and even had Rulon been able to sire children, he died months before, I think she meant to say if, months before my pregnancy, making it physically impossible. I had tasted freedom, and to go back and witness the strict manipulation of the people broke my heart. I did not judge them, having once been them, but I made a commitment to assert the gift of my independence more strongly within myself. I would celebrate my liberty. I thought of Roxy and her darling earrings, and with a sense of purpose, I got my ears pierced the week after we returned. When I looked in the mirror, though, I saw a fearful and questioning face instead of a triumphant one. Somehow I vowed I would find a way to be fully free. As winter once again melted into our second spring away from Short Creek, I went to work for Dr. Bob as a receptionist, secretary, and clerk. Although he was incredibly patient and kind, he was floored by my nearly non existent life skills. Ben and I paid cash for almost everything and dropped off utility bills in person. I did not know how to balance a checkbook, much less use any kind of basic accounting software. Wow. Fortunately, I love learning, and it was eye-opening for me to see the medical field from the other side. Doctors were not a part of some secret government scheme to poison, falsely impregnate, abuse, or annihilate people. Between my work and Ben's, we no longer had to scrape to survive day to day. Ben began looking for higher paying construction work he had been skilled in since his FLDS youth. We weren't wealthy, but we had risen out of the lowest hierarchy of survival, food, clothing, and shelter, and I found myself hungry for self-actualization, including the opportunity to educate myself. I looked longingly at college students heading to Southwestern Oregon Community College in Coos Bay. One day, I will join you, I promised myself. Later that spring, Michelle asked if I would babysit so she and her husband Tim could share some time away together. I was honored, she would ask, and expected to spend time with her charming and excited to spend time with her charming kids. Kyle loved to watch and imitate Gracie, who was 2 years older. Hey, before we leave, Michelle said, I recorded a show for you. Several FLDS women were on Oprah. I thought you might want to see it. Surprised but appreciative, I nodded. When the children went down for the naps, I sat down to watch Carolyn Jessup's, a woman I greatly admired and respected, had escaped from the FLDS and her husband, my Uncle Merle, just 5 months after I left. She had the courage, intelligence, and miraculous luck to be able to escape with all of her children intact, which I had never seen before. Usually, a woman's children were kept or kidnapped, used as leverage to bring her back and keep her until she was submissive again. Flora Jessup's, a cousin of Carolyn's, had escaped at 16 from her father's physical and sexual abuse and a forced marriage to her first cousin. She had been active for the last couple of years in anti-child abuse work, especially involving women and children in the FLDS. There were other women on stage too, and I was shocked that several made broad, far-reaching statements implying that sexual abuse and physical abuse were present and pervasive in every single home. This was simply not true. I knew for a fact that it did not happen in every single home. There were good FLDS people who cared about the welfare of their children. Abuse was prevalent, and I was glad they had the courage to address it, but I realized that anyone on the outside who watched would think every FLDS person was sick and depraved, and anyone within the FLDS would turn away from the exaggerations. On one hand, fear and secrecy allowed abuse to continue among our people. That was not healthy and needed to be stopped. On the other hand, trying to break decades of silence through embellishment was wrong, and it detracted from the influence these women could have. The truth lay somewhere in the middle, along with dignity for people inside and outside of the FLDS. An electric pulse ran down my spine. I felt an unexpectedly strong sense of determination. If I ever had the opportunity to speak, I promised myself that I would take it and consciously speak only the truth. And that's where we're ending our reading today. Good for her. Good for her. I think that we're seeing that there's so much that goes into them leaving and so many aspects that are still hard for them to work through. And she's kind of giving us a taste of it. I never even thought about the fact that these men are taught that they don't have to do anything, that the women do all of that. Because I found myself getting really irritated with men in that reading. But like she said, it goes back to this is what they were taught. I just feel like hopefully he unlearns some of those behaviors and he shows up more for her. But I guess we'll see. Anyways, thank you guys so much for being a part of this reading. Let me know what you thought of this chapter. Like the video. If you've been here a few times and you haven't subscribed, what are you waiting on? Go ahead and do that too. We're on the road to 4,000 and I hope to get there sooner than later. Until next time, peace.